Llantillo, just before 8 AM in the morning. Church there. I'm just going to have a little stroll. Nowhere in particular, but I will head towards the spot where me and John Hanson erected a memorial to Margaret Fry last year on the site of the Berwyn UFO landing back in 1974. Nice frosty morning. We had some new builds there. A bit different the village today than it was in 1974. New road there, Pro-Helig. And there's all sorts of developments going on here. Caravan site now. And Llantillo's come to the modern age. Bit of a backwater in 1974. Really Blaen y Cwm to Llantillo village. Mae congosedd dim bech yn rhoi rhywbeth drwy hun, na chaiff yn rhyw gerbyd teithio ar hun ar ran hwnnw o'r ffordd. Blaen y Cwm. For one day this road will be blocked. Yeah, nearly 500 yards of road. BT putting up telegraph poles, telephone lines. I'm currently on this lane which goes for about 3 miles to a dead end, a place called Blaen y Cwm, and this is the access road up the valley. It's known as Pennant. Goes up the valley, I say is the access road to the few farms that would have been involved in the Berwyn UFO incident. That conifer plantation wasn't there in 74. But the hill and the ridge on the top of it, the summit of the hill, is known as Cefn Penlletti, and it was just rough ground. And then over the horizon there's green fields, grazing fields. All that land was in the ownership and used by Hugh Lloyd's family. There's farms over there on the other side of the valley there, where he was living at the time. He doesn't live there now, he's on a different farm. His family still own that one over there, mind. When the air tremor struck, people came out of their houses and thinking there'd been some sort of big bang explosion, that sort of thing. And over that rise they saw flashing lights, and that led to the belief that a plane might have crashed. But if I stand here, nice half moon up there, it's between those two poles. If I stand here, where that ridge is there with the clump of trees, that's known as Nes Gron. In the valley to the left there is the track that goes up onto the hillside where Hugh Lloyd went with the police. But looking for this alleged plane crash. But that conifer plantation, again, that wasn't there. Another 2.5 to 3 miles beyond that is where the UFO was, which of course renders it absolutely impossible for anyone down here in the valley to have seen it. Only people in elevated positions had any opportunity to do that. And we will get there, but if I just zoom in through the trees there, you can see some conifers in the background there. That's where I'm heading for. That's about 2.5 miles away, and I'll be up above that conifer plantation a bit later, all being well. It gives you an idea of the geography of the place, and say anyone in this valley, it was actually impossible for them to see anything going on over the rise at the top of those hills, which made a lot of the so-called witness claims quite invalid. Second-hand, secondary, tertiary witnesses, that sort of thing. Bit noisy over there, a load of dogs barking, but that's Garthiine. That's where Hugh Lloyd was living as a 14-year-old teenager, 1974. And if I move along there, cottage there, that's the lane there. Starts off as Berwyn Street in the village, and it goes along, up, and we come to two properties there. The top one is Blaena Dreacha. It's the top one, and Blaena Dreisa, the bottom one. And the road goes up to the left there and up into the trees. That's where the police went. There was a Mrs. Williams who had a nice letter off Gwynedd Constabulary, as it was then. It became North Wales Police in the April of 1974. She had a nice letter off the police thanking her for their hospitality. She's living up there. Just by those houses is the limit of the public road. There's a bit of a turning space there now, and beyond that it's a very rough track, four-wheel drive type stuff. And so that's why Hugh Lloyd took the police up in his parents' commandeered Land Rover. But that lady fed the police and tea and biscuits, that sort of thing, and she received a nice letter from North Wales Police thanking her for the hospitality whilst they were here for a couple of days. Incidentally, at the top of the hill there, in the land beyond, Dr. Ron Madison, it was Keele University, he was involved. He organised a flight over here with signs of a meteor impact, that sort of thing, and Hugh Lloyd actually took a day off school and guided them round the land up there, foot search as well, and of course they found nothing. But that's as far away from Llandrillo did any officialdom go, public officialdom should we say. The police searched the following day, and the three-man RAF search and rescue group from RAF Valley, they were up there. They only ever searched that land up there and the land behind there, near Scron there, and so the UFO was about 2.5 miles further on. And I've always maintained that although the air tremor wasn't planned, and the lights from the hunter's lamp was never planned, and all the activity centred on the fields above the village there, over that tree line, it quickly turned into the ability to use this as a ruse. The following day, on the 24th, they resumed a search. So we're talking 12 hours now after a plane had allegedly gone missing. A military or a civilian plane missing would have been long since reported, but there was no report ever made. So they effectively searched for a missing plane, a crashed plane that never existed, and they must have known that. But they searched and searched, and in the end concluded that there was nothing to be found. Of course, all the people in the village here and everyone else around, all their eyes were looking here because of the police and the RAF. What they weren't looking at was the land, 3 miles from here, where the UFO was. It was a perfect way to steer everyone away from over there and get them to focus on here. It was a deliberate ploy to divert their attention. About 3/4 of a mile along this road now. It always tickles me this, the world over road signs, always used for target practice. There's a fair few dents in that one. From this angle you can see that woodland there, which is above Llanfihlo, Kevin Pensletty, and the fields behind. Those fields and a bit of rough ground beyond that was where the police search took place. If I just go down to that tree there and zoom in amongst the branches, you might just be able to make out some properties there. That's the two houses there, Blaen y Isa. And in the gap there, of course, is where the track goes up onto the open fields and then onto the moor above that, and then you're on your way up to the summit of Cader Berwyn. That's something else that was taken advantage of by those wanting to debunk whatever was on Cader Berwyn. Is you can't see it from here, but in the background all there is the Berwyn range. These are the lower slopes, and the furthest most one above Corwen is Moelferna, and then you come sort of this way. There's an ancient trackway. It's a byway today. It goes over the Berwyn, Llanam and Dyffryn Ceiriog. Part of it's known as the Wayfarer Way. Some guy had a pen name Wayfarer, who was the first, if you like, exploratory off-road cyclist, and that's the pen name he used when he was writing about his journeys. There's a memorial up there to him, and then the ridge line goes up again, and you go into the summit then of Cader Berwyn, and Cader Berwyn is the summit above Llanfihlo. It's not Cader Berwyn. Cader Berwyn summit, as a crow flies, is probably about 4.5 miles that way, above that ridge even. I've camped above there, and we'll be going today in this video to the far end of that conifer plantation. There's a track at the bottom of it near a farm called Rhyd, and I'll follow that track up the far side of that conifer, and then you're up onto the open hill. So I've got another couple of miles to go, an uphill in there, and once we're up there you'll be able to see I think today anyway, easily the summit of Cader Berwyn. But you get an idea of the terrain here, and anyone who debunks this event, they just simply haven't been up onto these hills in any meaningful way. If they did, their concoctions would have been a lot more difficult. There's a little hamlet down here called Pennant, and that's interesting in its own right, because just beyond there is a little house called I've forgotten the bloody name of it now. Tynant, that's it. And that was a significant part of the story, albeit relating to 1982, not 1974. But this lane, as I said before, is called Pennant, and it's the only place just outside Llanfihlo there, roughly where I was stood earlier. It's the only known reference to a what might be termed a roadblock. I know a witness who allegedly was stopped by the army, wasn't the police, as far as I'm aware. And she was on her way home from work, and this impromptu roadblock was just by where she lived. It was all quiet. That was on the night of the Berwyn event, and apparently she was just asked who she was. I know who the woman is. I've tried to contact her, but she's trying to remain contactless. And also her brother and her sister-in-law, I've tried to go through them to access her, and they've thrown up a wall of steel around her as well. So that makes me strongly believe that there was some element of truth in what happened. And that came about because the next day when she was in work, or the next time she was in work, she told the boss what had happened, and he related that story in a letter to Margaret Fry. I followed it up some years later, and he reiterated it. So there's certainly a lot of validity in it, but until she comes forward, it can't really be confirmed. This road eventually peters out at a property called Berwyn UFO. If you look on Ordnance Survey maps in Wales, you'll see lots of places, dwellings and just geographical spots called Berwyn UFO. It just means the top end of the valley, the furthermost reaches, if you like. When this road ends at Berwyn UFO, it carries on as a rough track up, and if I just zoom in there, it goes up that rough ground there to the main road over the Berwyn from Bala to Llangwnog and over towards the English border, the B4391. And when you get to the B4391, if I swing a bit to the left there, you'll see that hills there. There's a path there which goes up to Moel Sych, and then up to the summit of Cader Berwyn, and that's the route you have to follow. So over there's the B4391, where that district nurse Pat Evans was accredited with being the first person to see the UFO, or whatever it was, on the ground. She wasn't the first person to see it. There were witnesses who watched it come down. If I go behind that forestry there and swing round a bit more, you'll see, where are we? I'm not sure the light's good there, but in the background there is rough moorland. That's the mid slopes going up to the summit of Cader Berwyn. So anyone watching this, I'm just trying to give them a feel for the area, because I'm probably the only person who's ever been interested in this event who's actually ever gone up onto the moors. I've walked miles and miles and miles, freezing cold, wellies full of water. I've camped up there. I've carried out experiments with lights over the years, and as far as I'm aware, I'm the only person who's ever done that. Everyone else who had something to say about the Berwyns either saw nothing. As I said, they were either secondary or tertiary witnesses, and they were just repeating other people's stories, or they just wanted a little 15 minutes of fame by saying, oh, I know someone, I saw something, that sort of thing. And some researchers who basically stood on the sidelines rather than being in the thick of the game. So standing on the side of a road, or a convenient place where you can get a vehicle, and up there is not a place you can conveniently get a vehicle. A lot of people have commented on the Berwyn case from such locations. They'd never gone onto the moors, they never got wet, they never got dirty, they never got cold. And you have to do this. It's not the best case in the world for convenience. Richard Hall said to me once it was the worst place he'd ever been to, following up a UFO event. It was just so remote. There's a little fork in the road here. I'll be going this way, but down there comes to a little hamlet. You can't see much down there, it's a bit of tree growth, but there's a little hamlet of houses down there and a little sort of corrugated hut type chapel and that sort of business. And this is the pen and telephone box. Oh, yeah, that took some effort. Please insert a credit card. Right, hasn't been used for a while. That's a real effort to pull the door open there. I think I've been the first person to pull that door open in months. Sealed up. I don't recall the number for this one. The telephone box in Llandrillo was an important part of the Berwyn story. Because some very peculiar things happened. People used it to phone the police. The switchboard at Colburn Bay, the north where Gwynedd Constabulary then, headquarters was jammed up. People called them because of this earthquake. People, not a lot of people had telephones in those days, private ones. A lot of people went to the call box in Llandrillo and rang the police, which was bizarre because there was a police house just not so many yards away, and it makes you wonder why people just didn't knock on the door of the police house. After all, the police were active that night, more so than they like to crack on. I'm just going to come to this property, Tenant. Stop there. Just a nice little chat with the current occupier of the house. She's well aware of the Berwyn incident, but this is Tenant, and it's 2 miles along the road from Llandrillo. And as I've just been explaining to the lady, it's significant because on the 12th of February 1982, in the little valley up there, there's a stream coming down that valley, and near the side of the stream is there was a plane crash. A young student pilot on a 45-minute sortie crashed his plane and died, and he obviously went missing, and they found the wreckage next day. It took a few days to extract the wreckage. 3 farmers shared £400 compensation, according to an FOI response I got from the Ministry of Defence. But whilst they were guarding the site and taking it in shifts to do that, the then owner of this house let them use an outhouse. They billeted in this little outhouse, and he sort of looked after them. And following the event, the RAF presented them with a big painting of a helicopter, and he showed me that it wasn't him actually, he died. His other relatives who inherited the house, they showed me the painting about 10 years ago. And then I heard he'd moved, and this lady's just told me now, it's 2015 she moved in here. So it was probably about 10 years ago when I saw that picture. but the wreckage of the plane was actually picked up by another helicopter and taken to a field in Berwyn and then loaded onto trucks, and it was taken away. But the reason this is significant is because there was a large military presence. Of course, they were airmen, they were RAF people, not army, and debunkers have persistently tried to use that event in 1982 to thwart claims that there was a military presence on Cader Berwyn over there in 1974, a few years earlier. Had that plane crash not occurred, it would have been a lot more difficult for them. But then, you know, irrespective of what came down on that hillside in January 74, the people who want to rubbish it will stop at nothing to do so. But yeah, pleasant little chat there. Breezy now. This property here is called Rhyd Gethin. Rhyd is a Welsh name for a ford in a stream or a river, so it's Gethin's ford, and we'll pass there later, but if we go to that property there, that's Blaenau Pennant, and right up there is Blaenau Coombe, a walker there. I saw him walking up behind me. Let's climb over this little fence. It's not an official footpath. Just got to ford this stream now. Just head over that way. Yeah, out of breath coming up there. Bit of a steep clip there. This track that I'm on is not a public footpath. It goes up there, and just below me is that former farmhouse, Blaenau Pennant, and Rhyd Gethin's down there. Just seeing the trees there, actually, I think. Yeah, Rhyd Gethin. It's holiday home now. And the only access up onto the hillside here is this lane. Now, I'll walk up as I'm talking. But interestingly, I received some information through Hugh Lloyd from someone who claimed he didn't want to be identified. And of course I have absolutely no idea if the information is even true at all. I've only got Hugh Lloyd's word for it. But the information given was that a house somewhere on the outskirts of the village had a knock on the door about 9:20 in the evening, and the girl who answered the door, well, I presume she answered the door, she could have just been relating it, but there were soldiers in the yard, in the farmyard, and what was claimed was all the radios had gone down, and they asked could they use a telephone in the house to make a call, which the call took place. No detail about that, of course, but it was all civil. A phone call was made and they left, presumably to come back up the mountainside. If the radios didn't work, they'd probably already been up here, and then someone would come down to make a call. Putting 2 and 2 together and making 5 for a change. It's about a 20-minute walk from those houses down there up this track. There was no trees here then, it was all open. Up this track onto the open hill and to where District Nurse Pat Evans would have seen her so-called fairy lights zigzagging towards the object. Now she arrived at about 5 to 10 and those lights were already zigzagging up the hill towards the object. If you knock off 20 minutes before that, you're looking at 25 to 10 type thing, and these soldiers were allegedly trying to use a telephone at 20 past 9. So the timeline's there. Whether it's all true or not remains to be seen. However, as things stand, Pat Evans claims she saw these fairy lights. But I should actually emphasise that it wasn't just Pat Evans who saw these fairy lights. She was accompanied by her 2 daughters who also saw them, and I do put a bit of store in always mentioning their presence, because the debunkers habitually don't mention Pat Evans' daughters in what I think is some cynical attempt to devalue her as a witness. Oh, it's just there, she's saying what she saw. But in fact, although family members aren't necessarily the best witnesses to support you, there were 2 other people present. So I always try to mention them. But just come through that gateway now, out the forestry, as it were. And this is what you might call the first part of the open hill. So just plod on up here. I like to think I'm reasonably fit. I do a lot of wild camping and walking and stuff, but I'm not getting any younger. And each time I come up here, it gets that bit steeper. And as I say, very few, if any, researchers have been up here, even fit and able ones. Researcher Margaret Fry, but she couldn't get up here, but she had mobility issues, so that's understandable. But people who are perfectly fit and able, who haven't been up here, that's a different story altogether. I just personally can't take them seriously. I'm an angler now. I've been an angler all my life, but these days, as I say now, as I get a bit older, I get a bit more disillusioned, because you see places like one end of the promenade in Colwyn Bay on the North Wales coast, or one end of the promenade at Craigside at Llandudno, and all the anglers are all grouped there, all fishing into the sea. And people often say, oh, it must be a good place to fish. And in fact, it's not at all. It's no more or less worse than the next place. What it is, it's just convenient. The anglers park up on the side of the road and they only have to walk 50 yards with the gear and they're at the water's edge. They fish there because it's convenient. It has nothing to do whether there's any fish there in numbers. And this is common of a lot of things. But anglers are a good example, and a lot of UFO researchers are like that. You know, oh, a flying saucer allegedly crashed in that wood over there, but they don't actually go in the wood, they stand on the side of the road next to the car pontificating. And for me, that's not good at all. Incidentally, I'll just point down there, that house down there is the top of the valley, top of Pennant there, Blaenau Cwm, it's the name of the property, and the path goes behind this little hill here. And carries on up that valley there to the main road, the B4391. There's those hillocks again, that ridge there, going all the way to the summit of Cader Berwyn. There's forestry on it now, but that's summit there, that ridge, is called Kevin Koch. You can see why it might be Koch, reddish colour. But the only other witnesses to this event were in a house about 3 miles beyond that hill, at a slightly higher elevation, and when the air tremor struck, the couple there came out and saw up here in the sky a big white light. They watched it for a few minutes, then went and gathered the neighbours. They all gathered in Gathcock's yard and they watched it. There's a vehicle there on the that ridge there, Kevin Koch, as this object sank down towards the ground, it disappeared from their view in the dark, but in fact it came down behind that hill, if you like, on the hillside here. It went out of their view, and that was excellent because the summit of that hill, the known altitude and the parameters of that hill is easily defined, and that meant that the summit of that hill had to be higher than the was on the hillside behind, and that whittled down a huge amount of the hillside. So it couldn't have been to the right of the hill or to the left of the hill, and it couldn't have been any higher than the hill. So you just use that as a corridor straight onto the mountain here, and the object had to have been within that corridor. When Pat Evans was on the road over there, debunkers tried to say that she didn't know what she was looking at, she had no points of reference. But in fact that's just not true. Anyone who's been along there knows full well that the terrain and the view disappears at certain points. So there was a corridor from where she was. So you can be pretty certain that where those two corridors crossed each other the one from Kevin Cork behind me, and the one from the main road over there, you can bet your life that's where this object was. Just down there, as I mentioned, there was Blana Coombe, and that property you might think has got a view up onto the hillside here, especially when all the trees weren't there. But in fact, when I go a bit further, you'll see that they had absolutely no view of events on this hill at all. The terrain comes up there like that on an angle, and then it goes over a rise there, and all the activity was about another half a mile further on. So anyone in that property at the time would have seen nothing. Might have heard the earthquake or felt it, and even as they came out at this end of the valley, there was nothing to see. The poachers or hunters' lamp was 3 miles down the valley there in Llandrillo. And I strongly suspect if those soldiers were moving up and down this path here, that they probably kept their presence being covert as quietly as they possibly could, not drawing their attention to any lights that they might have and things like that. But once they were over this rise, torchlights wouldn't make a bit of difference. There's quite literally no one here to see anything, unless of course you happen to be passing on the B4391 over there, as was the case with Pat Evans. She did say publicly several times in an interview with Margaret Fry that she saw no one on that road that night except a military vehicle coming up as she was going back home. So you're looking at about 10 past 10. She would have been a mile or so down the road by then, going back to Llanderfel where she lived. She later changed her story and said she met no one. But that was a bit peculiar, of course, because she seemed to forget that she said it to Margaret Fry and 2 other witnesses who were present. She made a note of it, and she showed them the scrap of paper where she made a note on it that she'd met this vehicle, and then later tried to retract it. Whether she was suggested to, told to, or whether she just decided she had enough of people harassing her, remains to be seen. But one of her own relatives told me that she changed the story and taken a bung for it and all. Something she flatly denied to Richard Hall when he mentioned it. I mentioned it to Richard, he put it in his documentary, and then she got in touch with him and denied it. But of course there was witnesses to it, which makes it that little bit more difficult. See, there's that ridge there, the path goes up that. We'll get a better view near the summit. Over there there's a little cairn up there. You come to a sub-summit called Moel Sich, which means dry ball hill. It's actually the same height as Cader Berwyn, but Cader Berwyn takes the credit. get an idea of the terrain up here as well. It's quite rough underfoot. As I say, I've camped up here and it is quite rough underfoot in the dark as well, even with a torch. But when we get beyond this fence over here, that's when what you might call a false summit occurs, and the house down there loses total view of what's up here. Head for that gate. In 2022, on the night of the 23rd of January, I did a token gesture camp out, and I was up on this hill in the day, in the dark, just watching the traffic on the road. The odd bit of cars came along, and I camped down there, about 150 yards out from the trees. That stream there going up, that's it there. Zoom in. Where those rocks are there is the memorial to Margaret Fry, so I think I'll amble over that way and see what state it's in. A bit boggy here. The object, UFO, call it what you want, was just a couple of 100 yards above me there, and if I just pan around, there's a car just come out, B49, and that's earlier that some debunkers claim she had no parameters. We just watched that white car there. Zoom in a little bit. Just keep watching that white car, and in a few seconds it'll disappear. There you go. It's disappeared. The reason it's disappeared is because the terrain starts rising there, and also over there the road's coming up. Best view she had of it, also indicating that it was over here. According to her own testimony, she watched it for about 5 minutes, and she carried on the road, which is actually quite flat, about a third of a mile, and where that car disappeared is just after it is a little turning point. There's also an old county boundary. She turned the car down there, went back to the same spot where she stopped a few minutes before, looked again for a few minutes, and decided not what she could do about it, and then she headed back that way, headed for home, on route. As I mentioned earlier, the story changed. She originally said that she was some sort of army vehicle, had a chat with the driver. Simple. There's loads of crap on the internet about she was threatening all sorts of stuff. That just didn't happen at all. It don't matter who she spoke to. That was overzealous UFO enthusiasts making that up, sensationalists, and of course debunkers. 2 cars there, just overtaking you there. So she was definitely looking across here. For them to say there was no parameters, that's a load of rubbish. And that was just another attempt to discredit what she claimed she saw. Follow this track down now. This takes me down to where I erected a cairn, a memorial cairn for Margaret Fry in memory, because of course she was the primary researcher. She uncovered it, and just then jumped on the bandwagon, tried to claim it as their find. In fact, she discovered it. She'd done a lot of donkey work by then, and so I came on board with her in about 2003, 2002, 2003. She was the go-to person. Of course, 2 years ago she sadly passed. She was in her 90s then, and because of the friendship built up with her over those few years, and also fellow researcher John Hansen, we collaborated to make sure that Margaret's memory was kept going a bit longer. So down here, this cairn I erected last year for her. Just added a few more stones to this, and I'll add a few more before I go. And each time I come, the idea is to add more stones and make it bigger. Got a pile of stones over there, so I'll gradually move these into this big round cairn. And with the winter snow and frost and ice you get here, there'll always be 1 or 2 stones slip. But you can look at that, and that's just the nucleus of it. By the time I've actually finished this, most of that stone will be stacked up here. So I'll just do a little bit more, and then I'll amble back down the hillside. Well, there you have it. I wanted to come for a little stroll, so I just thought I'd give anyone watching this a short potted outline of the event and the terrain, and a few other bits and pieces, relevant bits and pieces. Unless you actually come up here, it's difficult to process everything and put it in perspective. Just follow these little sheep paths. Not the very brightest animals on earth, but they do leave some good trails, handy to follow. So I'll just stroll back to Llandrillo now. It's only about 4 miles, not far. A mile or so down to the road, and then it's good underfoot then, so making progress. Get out your vehicle and do the legwork, otherwise you miss so much. Anyway, more anon. Just as a side note, I'm just back passing that house from earlier, Teenans. I've just walked along and a sparrowhawk flew out of the hedge here. I thought it was unusual, they're not really hedge birds. I've just looked in now, and just lean in, and there's a a blackbird that I killed. It's just pulled the head off it. There's a couple of feathers higher up. So I've just deprived of its meal by disturbing it. It hasn't even got the best bits. Bit of blood on the feather there. I always check dead birds for rings. I always, any birds I find with rings on, I always let the British Trust for Ornithology know. It's all part of migration study, movement of birds. Yeah, so yeah, it's had a go on the back there. So I decapitated it, eating a bit of the neck meat, and it was just starting on the back end. Normally they pluck the breast out, but this one, it was quite happy to eat it in the hedge. Often they like to get them on a perch, like a post, like a fence post or something, and pluck them there. So a bit of fresh blood there. So half an hour ago, that was very much a live blackbird. It's yeah, female. It's brown. So I'll throw it back in here. Oops. Simply because that sparrowhawk might come back and finish dinner off. I don't really want to deprive it. The damage is done. It's just a little observation things. If you were in a car driving along here now, you wouldn't have seen that. In fact, the bird wouldn't have even flown out the hedge. So it just goes to show that legwork provides all sorts of observations.